I'm always looking for little touches to add to my slow stitching projects that make my work original. It might not be perfect, might be a little primitive. There might be some mistakes that you can see that my stitch length isn't always the same size. But I like that. It looks personal, it doesn't look like it's made from a computer, and it is far from perfect. In today's video, I want to show you a technique where I stitch star shapes onto little pieces of fabric that I can then add to my work. Now I could also just stitch the stars directly onto my work, but sometimes when I'm playing around, when I have a few minutes and some creative energy, I'll stitch these stars, and then I'll just save the little fabric charms to use in my work at another time. And here's how I do it. So to make my folk art star, what I like to do is just start with a series of 5 dots. I don't even use a ruler. So I make my top dot, and then I'll make 2 other dots beneath it. And these are the boundaries of my star. So if I want it to be larger, I make the dots further apart. And then I'll create 2 dots on either side, and then I'll connect them. So I take the top dot and I connect it to the bottom 2 dots. And then I take one of the dots that I've already made the connection to, and I connect it to the dot across. I connect it to the dot across from the bottom and right across, and there I have my star. Now if I want the star to look really tall, I make my dots really tall apart, and I can even connect those lines before I finish making the star, and then I can put my little other lines here and here to get a different shaped star. I can make a very fat star by making the dots wider apart. So depending on my use, I have different stars that I can stitch. So for ease of demonstration, I'm going to put my fabric in an embroidery hoop. But for most situations, I wouldn't put this in an embroidery hoop. So now to create my star and stitches, but I don't want it to look like it was a classically stitched star with little stitches leading the way. I want overlap and a lot of texture. So it doesn't matter which star I stitch, it's the same formula, the same process. I'll start at any one of the dots that I made, and I make a large stitch all the way across my fabric, right to that next dot. I'll pull the fabric snug but not terribly tight. Then I'll come up just slightly above where I went in for that stitch, pull my fabric again, and connect all of the dots using that same process. So I stitch down, I come just behind where I stitched, and I stitch all the way across, and this outlines that shape very nicely. Once I have all of the perimeter of that star done, I can obviously leave it like it is, but I don't like that there's such looseness here to my threads. So I want to tack it down, and this is where it starts adding the texture. So I start by going to all the lines that intersect, and I'll start right here on the right hand side at about 3 o'clock, and I'm just going to come in here and tack it down as if I was doing a couching stitch. So I'm just going over that intersecting line and securing it down. And I'll do this around all the intersecting lines. I'm going to go in a counterclockwise formation all the way around, making just little stitches. And depending on the width of these stitches, it'll have more texture or less texture. When the stitch is nice and tight, you won't even notice it. But if it extends a little bit past that star, you'll really start to see it. Now, depending on the size star you make overall, if it's small enough, this might be enough to tack it down and keep it from just being too loosely stitched. This one's right on the border. It would be fine. I could probably leave this in most cases. But to show you how to stitch a larger star, what I like to do is go up about halfway on the length of any of these legs and just make a couching stitch. So I come up there and I stitch down. Do it on the other side. And this also helps place it exactly where I want that long stem of the thread. And then the last stitch I like to do on each of the legs is to come up here, right at the very edge, and stitch right inside here. And that really tacks it down nicely. So I'll continue this all the way around each of the legs of the star. Again, I could use a contrasting color of thread if I wanted. I could make my stitches thicker if I wanted as well. And this is where you can really personalize it and get a different effect. When you have the larger stitches, it looks more rustic. And there I have my completed star. Now I wanted to show you some variations. So here's a star with white fabric and green thread using the same procedure. Here's some black thread on some printed fabric. And here's a series of stars. And it's an intriguing result. It's very artistic and very textured. It's just a nice little thing to add to your repertoire when using your slow stitching if you want to add texture or shapes and you want to think of something a little less traditional. So that's how I sew my stars. The results are primitive and it looks handmade, and I like it that way. Please be sure to follow me here on YouTube and click the like button if you found this video helpful. That'll encourage me to make more in the future.